interesting. If President Obama declared himself as a white man, how people might respond to that, because it's difficult enough for some people to believe he was born. But that's a whole nother training. So why do we have the opportunity, why do we have the responsibility to talk about poverty and wealth in the United States? Part of that is because it's our responsibility, because we're one of the greatest nations on the face of the earth. I love America. And if you didn't clap, you should have. One of the things that makes us one of the greatest in the nation, and I say one of the greatest on the face of the earth, is because I've been to Sweden. Ooh, love it. It's clean. Oh my goodness. But why do we get to have this discussion? Because we have this thing called the Constitution of the United States is why we get to have this discussion, and why we're one of the greatest countries on the face of the planet. And so we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Poverty is un-American. It goes against everything that we say that we stand for. So we have to talk about it. Because if I'm not able to secure food, if I'm not able to secure a good job for myself, I sat in a session that talked about the collateral consequences of a criminal record. If we're not able to stand up and look at how we redefine felonies, what we do with felonies, then we create this permanent underclass of Americans that will never be able to live up to what this great country says that we are supposed to espouse and believe. Some people say, well, when they wrote that document, they weren't talking about black men. Some people say when they wrote that document, they weren't talking about women. You know what I say to that? If they didn't want me to believe it, they should have never wrote it down. So this document becomes very important to us. How many people, and you don't have to answer this question, but how many people have actually read the Constitution of the United States since 8th grade? I will tell you, if you don't have a copy of that at your fingertips, if you don't know exactly where to get that, shame on you, because the people who are not for liberty and justice, for those people who are fighting against the causes that we think make a great America, they know the Constitution. Many of us operate off of feelings, but they have weapons. They know their rights. They know their responsibilities. But many of us are still operating off of feelings. And so it's time for us to stand up and know that the weapons of our warfare are not weapons, but they're ideas, they're concepts. And many of those concepts did not come from us. So it's our responsibility. Next, in your handout, I just want to point out a couple of things that I think are extremely important. Some truths about human beings. Humans can learn, change, and grow. Who I am today is not who I was at 17. Thank God. That people do what they think works even when what? It doesn't. So a family uses the child's social security number to get the heat turned on, not because they knew that they would get busted, but they thought that was a good alternative because they have a felony. Our county jails are full of people who thought that doing what they did would actually help. Number three, all human beings are goal-directed. All behaviors are trying to drive or gain something through their actions. And so I find it very interesting that when we ask kids why they took the cookie, we know why they took the cookie. And why did they take the cookie? Because they wanted to take the cookie. But then we get frustrated when they give us the answer that we're not looking for because we know why they took the cookie. And the answer they typically give us is what? I don't know. I don't know. And lastly, sometimes we get caught up with people's attitudes, and that attitudes are actually a side effect of goal accomplishment. When people get what they want, they have a good attitude. When they're denied access to what they want, they have a bad attitude. Think about a teenager. In your life. So a coworker, a client, if they have a bad attitude, one thing we know about them for sure is that what? They're not getting what they want. They're not achieving their goal. And so our first responsibility is to make sure that we help them get their goal. And if we can't help them, then we help them get another goal, to find another goal. All right? And so what are these goals ultimately? What are people in poverty trying to get? What are people in wealth trying to get? We're trying to get the same things. Maslow talked about 5 things or 7 things depending on which pyramid you want to use. But I want to boil those down to what Alfred Adler talks about as these 3 essential things that people are driving or moving towards. And that is significance, belonging, and safety. Significance basically says that I have a purpose, a reason, a rationale for living. Belonging says that I am in networks who recognize my gifts and my talents. And we're in relationship with each other so I can give it to them and they can support me. And safety says that I am in networks that are emotionally, spiritually, mentally, psychologically safe for me to do the first 2 things. And that's be who I am, to give my gifts and talents, and to be in relationships with other people. But one of the things that starts to happen is that we create these categories, we create these false, we create these obstacle illusions that don't allow people access to being who they're supposed to be, to getting that significance, belonging, and safety. And all too often, it falls around poverty lines. I'm going to say something that may be inflammatory to some. For others, it will confirm what they already know. But one of the things that I have figured out is that white people did not enslave black people because they're evil. Does anybody know why white people enslaved black people? There was money to be made. See, if we start talking about why the true and authentic motivations for some of these things, we can get some of this emotional stuff out of the way. So the damnation, the guilt, the shame that people put on things, and we start talking about these things in a more elevated way, then we can actually get to some real results about things. And so I'm going to show a couple of videos that I want us to have some conversation about in the short time that I have. gone a little faster than myself. So I'm going to show about a minute of this, and then we can talk about it.
There's a chart I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups, the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart...
I'm going to stop right there. This is a video on YouTube. You can find it yourself. They go on and explain more things. And I would also encourage you not only to watch this particular video, but all of the commentary videos that try to debunk the assertions made in this. Because without both opposing sides, you will have a one-sided conversation. Right? So I want you to look at both opposing sides to this particular video. What I find interesting in this video is that oftentimes people talk about themselves as being in the middle class, right? Has anyone ever heard someone talk about being in the middle class? Right? Yeah. So I'm simple. I'm not a very sophisticated kind of guy. So I need things broken down very simply for me. And when I think of a 12-inch ruler, where typically would the middle be? 6 inches. Because 6 inches is half. Is that correct? Okay, cool. When we talk about poverty, we talk about class, we talk about money, we're actually very Orwellian in how we talk about this stuff. Because if the top earners are up to $1 trillion, and let's say that the bottom is 0, then the half should be what?